I would love to talk a bit about the United States. You were very clear that you believe Trump was going to win. We're recording this fairly soon after the election. You were right.
I knew he was going to win too. I'm not even a spy.
Yeah, but you didn't make any videos going on major podcasts claiming.
I could have made all the videos. I could have told everybody how this was going to shake down. But go ahead.
You also said that there was only one person in the Democratic Party that could have beaten Trump. If people haven't heard that, which I think, much of our audience might not have, can you just briefly explain who that person is and why you think they could have beaten him?
Michelle Obama is the only Democrat in the country that had a chance of beating Donald Trump. And I think that she knew that. I am certain Barack knew that. And the entire Democratic National Convention must have had a sit-down fireside chat over bourbons and cigars, recognizing that they only had one person who was a viable match for Donald Trump. And it's because what we just saw in our election cycle is that it's not about policies. It's not about power. It's not about, democracy and freedoms. It's a popularity contest tied in with political credibility. And Michelle Obama has incredible amounts of both political credibility and popularity, just like Donald Trump has, right? And even though it's easy for us to criticize Donald Trump's political credibility, he was a former president. He has his name on hotels all over the world. That, in the eyes of the average American, that is a high level of credibility.
Talk to us about the average American.
The average American is much more disappointing than any of us want to admit to. And that's just the truth of it, right? The average American, everything you look at, whether you're looking at salary or education level, or whether you look at hours spent behind a screen versus hours spent reading a book, on average, when you talk about the bell curve, right, a true average, the average American is not very well informed, not very well educated, not very physically fit, not very health conscious, does not make a very good salary, and does not spend a great deal of time engaging in personal enrichment activities. So that is the primary bell curve of America. And just like we were talking about earlier, Em, it's because that is a very good cog in a large machine. The extremes of the bell curve, that's where you find the people who are the most vocal, the people who are the most accomplished, the people who are the least accomplished, and also the most vocal, right? So what we really see day to day are the two outliers, active on TV, active on the internet, active on YouTube, active everywhere, right? The people producing are the outliers for the most part. The silent center is the piece that everybody forgets is the real decision maker for the future of our country.
Let's talk a little bit about the female aspect here, though, because many people, and I live in Los Angeles, so it's kind of like this, with all due respect to my city, the streets are littered with traumatized humans right now who cannot even lift their heads up. It's like a wasteland here. And what a lot of people are saying is the whole country prefers a rapist over a woman. And I feel that's too broad of a brush to be using when we try and accurately assess this situation. And also, I do believe that certain regions of the country, my region of the country included, tend to be a bit dramatic, meaning that's a really oh my God, it's catastrophic and it's, all these things. But if we're to take a more kind of measured view, can you explain? Because a lot of people would say, I don't think a woman is going to cut it for most Americans. I think they want dad. No matter what, dad's always done this job. Why would mom plunge the toilet when dad always plunges the toilet? And every time he plunges it, at some point we get to poop again, right? So talk a little bit about the female aspect of it, because I think so many people want to just be people hate women.
Yeah, gender is a very real thing. And the bias towards paternity in the United States is also a very real thing. But race and racial Injustice is also a very real thing in the United States, and so are racial biases. And yet we still saw Barack Obama take the office for 2 consecutive terms and have a very successful presidency. If you haven't discovered your natural-born spy skills, then somebody else may be using theirs against you. CIA teaches us there are only 3 types of people: those who manipulate, those who motivate, and those who are being controlled by one of the other 2. I built a 3-minute CIA-style quiz designed to help you unlock your secret psychological advantage and identify your biggest blind spot. This quiz will help you weaponize your natural gift and use it to get ahead of 99% of people in power, money, and purpose. Click on the first link in the description below or scan the QR code on your screen right now to take the test. I want you to discover your hidden spy skill and use it before someone else uses theirs against you.
I mean, I think certain people never recovered from the fact that we had a man of color as our president. People went crazy. They didn't give him a moment's rest, literally, because they were picking on him like he's a secret, like, Muslim operative. Like, it was crazy. Like, that's nuts.
Remember, we're talking about the bell curve. What you're referencing right now is an outlier. The person who can't sleep at night because there was an African American or there was a black president, that person exists, but they're not the silent center.
All right. So we had a black president. So that was good.
Correct. And I think, honestly, I think that the majority of Americans would welcome a female president. I think they would be excited for a female president.
They just didn't want this one.
That's exactly it. The problem is that the Democratic National Convention has put forth 2 females to the ticket for president, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, right? Neither of them, frankly speaking, was a woman that the majority of Americans wanted to see be the first. They didn't want that. They want, think about what Barack Obama was. Barack Obama was a man of color who worked his ass off to come from nothing to be the leader of the free world. That's what we want to see in a first.
A lot of the criticisms, though, that people did have of Hillary Clinton, and a lot of the criticisms people have of Kamala, and honestly, I think a lot of the criticisms people would have about Michelle is things that only women get criticized for. And I'm not looking to bring down the patriarchy so we can have a woman president. But I also think you have to understand the system that you're in. And the fact is, a woman is going to be judged differently. And we have to figure out how you deliver a package that people are going to want, even if we think they shouldn't feel the things they do about a woman, about her voice, about her suit, about her fucking hair. I don't care, but a lot of people do.
I get you. And I don't disagree with you. I think that the measurable pieces of impact here are that when you are a minority of any variety, and I would include women as a minority, if you're a minority of any variety and your platform promotes your minority, you are immediately ostracizing everybody who is not part of your minority.
And men are very, very sensitive to being left out. They are.
Well, not only that, but it creates a weird sort of hypocrisy. It creates a weird sort of hypocrisy in a party that says that gender shouldn't matter and then promotes femininity, right? It's difficult when you say that age shouldn't matter, but then you highlight youth. It's difficult when you say that wealth shouldn't matter, but then you highlight, poverty. It's not about, individual. It's not about people and their beliefs or value systems. It really is about the core way the brain processes information. It creates a sense of cognitive dissonance that people don't know how to process. And when people don't know how to process, they take the easier way out. Donald Trump is a very simple thing to process.
Really?
Oh, he's a very simple thing to process. Most people don't like Donald Trump. They just chose him because they didn't want the alternative.
Right. And they were, and at some point, most of our country is comfortable with all of the things that he says about all the people that he hates and all the people he wants to step on and the violence that he speaks of when he speaks of women.
I appreciate your point of view being a person in LA.
It's not about, hold on one second. Whoa. This isn't about a point of view. I'm talking about the things that Donald Trump says that he stands for is what people are choosing. It's not about a point of view.
I think if you believe that people are choosing what Donald Trump stands for, That is your point of view.
Got it.
I think there are plenty of people out there who are choosing Donald Trump for all sorts of reasons other than what he stands for.
I agree. I also, I do want to just bring one thing. You mentioned femininity. That actually does not really have a place for me in this conversation. Maybe you meant femaleness, that like you're presenting like, oh, men and women should be equal, but like I'm a woman, right? Like that's not necessarily femininity. Like femininity would
Fair.
imply like, is like they said that Kamala was Donald's worst enemy because he couldn't pick on how ugly she was, which was, his favorite thing to do about Hillary Clinton.
No, that's totally fair. And I did not know that femaleness is a word, but I know that now.
Well, femininity implies something different, but I think you meant if you're going to act like, oh, we're all equal, she should just be a neutered a neutered female. Maybe we shouldn't use any pronouns, but that's also as offensive to people.
Andrew, the world is a complicated place from an international diplomacy standpoint. Currently active wars, there's almost two different roles for the president, one internationally and one nationally. What does it mean to have Trump on the international stage now? And where are we in terms of the arc of American dominance? Are you concerned that we're at the end of that arc?
I wouldn't say that I don't think we're at the end of the arc. I don't think the evidence suggests we're at the end. I do think that it's not a smooth arc. There might be, some fits and bursts, some peaks and some valleys. And we're somewhere in those peaks and valleys right now. What I will say is that Donald Trump represents a very, what we consider to be a traditional, dominant, forceful, bullish American idea. He's not a diplomat. He doesn't believe in alliances. He doesn't believe in, equality. He believes in superiority. And within the government, it's important to understand, inside the government national security arena, that is how everyone thinks. American primacy is the term that we use to define the imperative of the future of the United States. So whether you're talking to the Army or whether you're talking to the CIA or whether you're talking to the FBI, you will hear the term American primacy. It means America must be the prime, the number one, the only superpower. Not necessarily because we are the best ever, but because if someone else rises to our level, it means that our national security interests will be threatened. Equality means that whoever was number one is no longer number one. It means that there's less control. It means that there's more risk. It means that there's less opportunity. Not no opportunity, just less opportunity. And that is the way the national security sector works. So anybody who was raised in a family that believes that American primacy is important, anybody who was cultivated professionally or educationally to believe that American primacy is important, they are going to lean towards that message much more than some of the other conflicting messages that we've seen from the Biden administration or the Harris administration, especially when the truth, Jonathan, the truth of what we see play out in the headlines is that we don't always tell the truth about why we make the decisions that we make policy-wise, why we support Ukraine but don't support, Israel, why we label Hamas and Hezbollah as terrorists, but Iran labels the U.S. military as terrorists.
That one's pretty clear to me, but I could just be speaking for myself.
There's all these different pieces that, because of the advent of technology and the spread of social media and the availability of information, we're now seeing that people have more access to create that cognitive dissonance than ever before.
Which countries benefited or had a vested interest in one candidate over the other becoming the U.S. president?
This was an amazing year for intelligence sharing and intelligence communication in advance of the election. 2016 was really the first time that Americans realized that there's election meddling. There's always been election meddling. It's just that 2016 was the first time that it became mainstream media. And then in 2020, it became a topic again. But from 16 to 24, you really got to see the intelligence community, what we call the IC, create a strategy for how to collect and combat actively foreign meddling and foreign intervention.
Sorry, can you explain for people who may not understand? Do you mean that other countries might try to change the number of votes so that a particular person will win?
No. We're not talking about anything that has to do with the actual manipulation after the vote. It's all about the influence campaigns in the lead up to the vote.
Got it.
Yeah, that's when the meddling happens, so that people can send false information, misinformation, disinformation to sway that big chunk of middle voters, because those middle voters might choose somebody based on a whim because they watched a movie, or
they might not know if Puerto Rico is referred to as trash, and then they might say Puerto Rico's trash, let's vote for that guy.
Yeah, you have no idea so that's what the foreign governments are very good at, meddling with disinformation and misinformation. But the intelligence assessments were really, really clear and really consistent. Russia wanted a Trump victory. And it's because, empirically, or at least what's known in open source, it's because Trump has made it very clear he wants to end the war in Ukraine, he wants to call a ceasefire, and he wants to move on. That's exactly what Vladimir Putin wants too, because that's, in Putin's vernacular, that is a victory.
It's what the Ukrainians would want, except not by being handed over to the Russians, which is presumably what's going to happen.
I mean, it depends on, if you're talking about what the Ukrainian people want, I don't think the American population has a very clear idea what the Ukrainian people want. What Zelensky has made clear is he wants the full return of all original pre-Crimea invasion Ukraine returned to Ukraine. And that was the promise that he made. That definition of victory is a very difficult definition to achieve, which is why anything less than that is a Putin victory. So Putin and Russia wanted a Donald Trump presidency because of that primary issue. However, Iran, who is a close ally of Russia, did not want a Trump victory. They wanted a Harris victory, because Iran is very, very familiar with how to skirt the sanctions and get around the diplomatic pressures and the economic sanctions when there's a Democratic president, because Democratic policy is usually open to more abuse than Republican policy. There's less saber rattling, there's less violence, there's less, intense military action. There's more soft power action. And Iran hates Donald Trump because Donald Trump was the commander-in-chief when IRGC General Soleimani was killed. So they very much wanted a Harris victory instead of a Trump victory.
So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about good guys versus bad guys. Nothing is as simple as that. And, many of us were raised, with an understanding, for example, that Russia is a country that does not have a free press. Russia is a country where I happen to know many people who fled Russia and Ukraine. They were not allowed to not even practice their religion. They weren't allowed to have rights as Jews, for example. And there was a huge campaign to evacuate, the Jews of Russia and the former, USSR. And, for many of us, we were raised with this sort of notion of like, Russia I mean, if I had to say good guy or bad guy, like a lot of people would say like, that's a bad guy, right? Or, Kim Jong-un, like North Korea, like, and I understand this is a lot more complicated and who's to say, but, for some of us, October 8th of last year brought about a real turnaround in, individual groups that are terrorist organizations that were now being called freedom fighters and, are being celebrated in many fringe aspects of this country. But what happened to good guy and bad guy? And do you understand that for some people, Trump making nice with a lot of people that many of us believe are bad guys feels problematic?
Oh yeah, it's the notion of a dichotomy between good and bad is an oversimplification of life. And what happens is when we're young and our parents and our community are trying to teach us the basic survival mechanisms to move forward, it's very easy to create dichotomies. Good, bad, rich, poor, expensive, cheap, right? Hot, cold. It's very easy to teach a dichotomy, but the thing is, as you grow and mature, you realize that the world we live in is much more nuanced than that. So to your point, Em, about Russia being a bad guy, do you know why we won World War II? Because of Russia. Russia was our closest ally. And Russia's strategy in World War II that defeated Nazism was the same strategy they used when they invaded Ukraine in 2022. So it's the same Russia in many ways, even though it's gone from being the Soviet Union to being just Mother Russia. So Russia used to be good, now they're bad.
Well, I mean, if you're a Jewish person, Russia was never good. Like, it got worse when Russia came in after liberation.
The notion of good and bad, the notion of good and evil, it's transient. People had different opinion about Germany, and people had a different opinion about Spain, and people had a different opinion about Argentina. Like, our opinions about countries change and shift as they relate to this question of American priorities and American interests. And that's why we have very famous statesmen who have quoted, right? There are no permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests.
Do you think that the world can exist without NATO, without the alliances that currently exist? I think one of the main concerns about Trump as a destabilizing force and putting America first and creating much more of a nationalism is that the world orders that have existed since the end of the Second World War have created some stability. Yes, there have been wars, of course, but there hasn't been a next world war. And, people are concerned that the undercutting of these alliances could leave a lot of chaos.
Yeah, and I think that what's happening is we're seeing a blending of two ideas, and people don't realize there's two distinct ideas that are blending into one. The idea that we need a new world order, I would say that is an accurate idea. The world order that was established after World War II, for anybody who doesn't recognize it, that world order was defined by American primacy. NATO was built in large part so that the United States could remain in control of Europe, right? The United States rebuilt Germany, rebuilt France, rebuilt the United Kingdom on the back of loans and weapons and the proliferation of technology that was American technology. NATO understands that, right? You've seen Germany and Spain and France take more of an independent streak in the last 8 years because they realize they're kind of under the thumb of the United States. And that is the old world order. What we need for a more democratic world is we need more powerful democratic alliances. The actual current NATO alliance is not democratic. It's very dictatorial based on American power and American primacy. Donald Trump, in one case, Donald Trump is saying we need to separate ourselves from NATO. That's kind of accurate. It's just that he doesn't understand that separating ourselves from NATO by making us less free than Europe is not a good idea.